Hey everyone, welcome back to the WithGen Podcast. So I still feel a bit sniffy, so hang on in this with me for a little bit. My voice is still doing all these things because, as you know, I've been sick last week. But you know what? It is what it is, and I really wanted to talk about this because we did a replay from Felix and my episode about leadership, and I wanted to dive a little deeper by myself because I've been a leader for years in corporate, in communities, in relationships, in a ton of things, just like you. And probably you don't even realize it. I am currently burning down all the shit I did wrong, so this episode isn't coming from, oh my God, I figured it out. It's coming from, I absolutely did not figure it out because I screwed up a ton of times. And here's what I've been realizing. We love talking about empathy and compassion and psychological safety and inclusive leadership and understanding people's circumstances. And as a person, I believe in all of those things, okay? But somewhere along the way, sometimes we're turning empathy into, therefore, nobody can ever experience a consequence. And that's not compassion, that's avoidance wearing a very cute therapy hat. Because here's the thing, soft leadership doesn't mean spineless leadership. You can be incredibly compassionate and still say, no, this is not acceptable. This needs to change. I love you and I'm not participating in this. I understand and the exception still stands. And that's what I want to talk about today. Kind of the difference between warmth without boundaries, which is permissive and you're allowing a lot of shit, or warmth with standards, which is more authoritative, the thing that we actually need in our lives. Because one creates safety and the other one creates chaos disguised as compassion. So let's go. And for the people who don't know me yet, my name is Jen. Welcome to the WithGen Podcast, and we're talking about psychology and mindset and everything that comes in between. And today we're talking about leadership, not just on the work floor, but definitely also in your family and friend groups and communities and everything, because we all cater to that leadership, and we're all entitled to take some of that leadership on our own shoulders. Yeah, definitely. We're allowed to do that. So here we go. First of all, companies love their values. Like the bullshit things that you hear, like, oh my God, integrity and kindness and courage and inclusion. Blah, blah, blah. Okay, babe, frame it and put it next to the coffee machine. But here's what I actually care about. What happens when your best salesperson humiliates a junior colleague? That's where I will find out about your values. And it's the same thing in families, right? People can say, oh, we're a close family. All right, but can everyone disagree with dad without being punished? Or when people say, oh, we always support each other. Great. Can someone say no without being guilt-tripped? And in communities, you hear a lot like, oh, but this is a safe space. All right, wonderful. But what happens when someone repeatedly makes other members uncomfortable? Your response reveals everything. And people don't only learn behavior from official rules and codes of conduct and that stuff. We look around and that's how we learn. What do people actually do here? That's called the descriptive norm. If the rule says X, but everyone watches Y happen repeatedly without consequence, Y becomes the actual culture. So your values tell me what you aspire to do. Your patterns tell me who you actually are. That's why I love data and I love psychology and I love all of this in my research, because that's literally what we do as people. And then you also have like the person who repeatedly misses deadlines. And then other people come up and they're like, oh, but well, they're stressed. Or someone repeatedly explodes during the family arguments. and oh my God, they've had a difficult childhood, or someone repeatedly dominates your community or, your business or whatever. And then you go, oh, but they didn't mean it. Or when someone violates a relationship boundary, you can say, oh, but they're just passionate. And every time you basically just excuse this. Well, okay, I'm stressed too. I've had a difficult childhood too. I'm passionate too. But you need to take into account that other people also live on this earth. Those things can explain behavior, but they do not magically erase impact from what we're doing as people. Behavior that repeatedly achieves its desired outcome without meaningful cause is more likely to persist. If shouting makes everyone back down, then the shouting works. If missing commitments means someone reliable quietly fixes everything, missing commitment works. If drama gets disproportionate attention, drama works. You don't even need all the conscious manipulation for all of this. Systems train behavior from people. Sometimes you're not dealing with someone who refuses to learn, you're dealing with a system that has accidentally taught them they don't have to. So let's watch for that within our leadership as well. And then we also got the, oh, but that's just how they are section. And this one, oh, you're full on in my allergies. Every dysfunctional family has one, every workplace, every friend group. Like, people are just going, that's just mom. Don't start with him. She doesn't take criticism well. He has a temper. She's very sensitive. And this one is the worst one so far that I've heard, which is, but he's brilliant at his job though. And suddenly everyone else has a PhD in managing Steve. They know, oh, you shouldn't mention that. You shouldn't challenge this. You should wait until he's eaten. You should tell him this certain way. Or, people say, oh, you shouldn't invite those two people together. Or let Sarah handle it because she's good with him. And meanwhile, Sarah is fucking exhausted. Let's give her a break, shall we? Systems develop patterns that maintain equilibrium, even when that equilibrium isn't healthy. If one person is volatile, everyone else adapts around it, even though that one person just basically needs a bit of therapy, but that's okay. And eventually, the accommodation becomes normal. And when someone finally sets a boundary, they're suddenly called difficult. And we're not talking about the person who's been difficult. The person refusing to accommodate that behavior is being called difficult. Sometimes the person disrupting the family or the system isn't the person setting the boundary. They're just the first person refusing to maintain the dysfunction, okay? So let's respect that a little. This is a thing that should make you a little bit uncomfortable because someone needs extra support, fine. Someone needs flexibility, of course, let's do that. Someone needs compassion, absolutely. I'm all for compassion. But before you endlessly accommodate them, ask who is carrying that cost. Employee A, for example, continually doesn't deliver. Employee B quietly picks it up. You're being compassionate towards employee A, but what are you being to employee B? Or this one sibling creates chaos. The responsible sibling gets told, just let it go. You know what they're like. Who's being protected? And that's the way it is in a lot of situations, also in your communities and in other spaces. So who is actually carrying that cost? Systems develop complementary patterns where one person increasingly compensates for another. The more somebody overfunctions, like fixing and reminding and mediating and rescuing, shit like that, the easier it becomes for somebody else to underfunction. And then the reliable person gets rewarded with more responsibility, which is terrifying. I've been there, I've done that, I've been that person. So, being the easiest person to deal with should not earn you the privilege of carrying everybody else's shit. All right? And we also got the Stuff where we're telling people like, "Oh, but you're good at this. Can you quickly help them?" Or, "Hey, you're the sensible one. Could you talk to your brother?" Or in friendships, "You know how she gets. Could you just apologize?" Um, you know, then again, you're being the responsible one and your competence gets taxed. Your reliability becomes a prison. So, what I want to say with this is groups develop roles. Like, for example, Anna is the responsible one, and Tommy is the emotional one, and Joanne is the peacemaker, and Henrik is the difficult one, and there's always a fixer and a scapegoat. And once those roles are established, people unconsciously reinforce them. It's just what we do as humans. And here's the uncomfortable part. Sometimes you keep performing that role because it makes you feel valuable, which is poisonous. Well, it doesn't have to be poisonous per se, but it could turn into poison for you. So the real question here is, what role have you been assigned in your systems? And more confronting, what role do you keep performing because it makes you feel valuable? I would like you all to think about that for a little bit because I also took up these roles. I took the roles of like the fixer and a responsible one mostly because of my youth. And after 30 years of being alive, I was like, wait, hold the phone. I don't always want to be the responsible one. I also want to drop a ball and just see how it goes, and for Henrik to be exposed to the shitty system. I'm not the one who always has to fix everything, okay? So you can do that. You're allowed to do that. This is me allowing you to actually do that stuff. And we've also weaponized empathy. Here's the thing, empathy means I can understand your internal experience, but it doesn't mean, therefore, you're correct. Therefore, nobody was harmed. Therefore, boundaries totally disappear. Therefore, I tolerate this. Empathy is basically, I understand why this happened. And accountability is, it still can't continue. And then you can change it into support, which would be what would help you change it. And that would be excellent leadership. Any one of those three alone, you're basically missing something. They kind of work in a triangle. So I understand why this happened. It still can continue. And what would help you change it? Empathy, accountability, support. And I know I'm repeating myself a little bit, but I do think that triangle is crucial to leadership within our systems nowadays. If your version of empathy requires everybody else to swallow the consequences, congratulations. You've just outsourced the discomfort and you won't grow as a person. And I know I'm being a little bit harsh here, but that's genuinely how I think about it. So, what I'm trying to say here is that intention doesn't cancel impact, and consequences are not punishment per se. And also, there's a lot of brilliant assholes around us that really use the situation as, like, oh, but I could get away with it last time, so I probably can again right now. And this is why, in tons of places where leadership has brought us like work and family and friend groups and communities and all these spaces, there need to be a couple of people who debone the structure to make sure that other people are safe. And I'm just asking you right now, could you do this for other people? Could you take up that little bit of leadership role? Because I do think that this is our responsibility so that we can protect cultures within our family, within our community, within our friend groups, and our workspaces. And if you're willing to do that, you're basically an awesome leader. But we also need to be careful that therapy language can become a shield. Okay, psychological vocabulary is useful. Words like boundaries and triggers and unsafe and narcissist and gaslighting and trauma toxic, all these things, but it can also be misused to give ordinary conflict a clinical sounding moral hierarchy. And I want to avoid that here with you. Someone disagreeing with you isn't automatically gaslighting you. Someone disappointing you hasn't necessarily violated a boundary. Being triggered tells you something important about your nervous system. It doesn't automatically tell you whether another person acted wrongly. And therapy language should make us better at relationships, not better at winning arguments. So please let's be careful here. I don't want to be too clinical about leadership and relationships as well in this podcast episode. So this is definitely worth noticing. We've spent all this time identifying everybody else's bullshit, okay? Excellent. But unfortunately, you are also somebody else's difficult person sometimes. So ask yourself, what are people tolerating from me? Does my position make it harder for them to challenge me? Does my family walk around any of my moods? Things like that. The more power you hold, the less reliable silence becomes as a feedback. An employee not complaining doesn't necessarily mean they're happy. A child not challenging a parent doesn't mean they agree. A community member quietly disappearing doesn't mean everything was fine. What you can actually use here are these 5 questions that I've set up last week, because I was zooming in on this since I'm redoing my own community and I want to let the pus of the wound of personality ooze the fuck out, because I also need it. So question 1, what behavior does everybody complain about but nobody addresses? There's probably a tolerated culture. 2, who receives the most accommodation? And is it proportionate as well? 3, who pays for that accommodation? Find the invisible cost. So the person who always picks up someone else's slack, things like that. 4, what do we claim to value that our actual behavior contradicts? That's like your culture gap within your family or your other system at work or whatever. And 5, what am I tolerating because addressing it would make me uncomfortable? Go sit with that one, because I've sat with that one like a million times. It still makes me hella uncomfortable. But normally, once you start addressing stuff, it starts becoming a little bit more okay. Okay, the first month is hella painful, but afterwards, it becomes so much better for you and for the culture of the whole group as a whole. All right, so we've spent the last however many minutes identifying dysfunction in the systems and the patterns and the people who are quietly carrying everything and brilliant assholes and family scapegoats. But here's the thing. I'm not advocating for harsher leadership, okay? I'm advocating for braver compassion. Compassion that can tolerate somebody being disappointed. Empathy that doesn't erase accountability. Boundaries that remain boundaries when they're inconvenient, basically. Leadership that can say, I understand, and then, when necessary, and this still needs to change. Because whether we're talking about a company, family, relationship, friend group, or community, culture is built in the space between what we say matters and what we're actually willing to protect. And here's my final thought. If your kindness requires everyone else to tolerate someone's bullshit, it isn't kindness anymore. It's conflict avoidance in a very expensive costume. So this week, ask yourself the 5 questions that I just asked you, honestly, without justifying, just observe it. And if you recognize yourself in the dysfunction here, if you see your own system reflected back, send this to someone, just the one person who needs this, someone who needs permission to finally set a boundary, someone who needs to know that saying no does not make them unkind at all times. It makes them clear. And also, if you want to talk about boundaries, if you want to be in a safe space for boundaries, if you want to be in a safe space for a better mindset and kinder mental health for yourself, I would love to see you in a WithGen channel on Instagram, because that's where we discuss this stuff. Until next time, and don't forget that you kick ass and that I care about you.